Well, and welcome to this week's episode of The Dental Guys. I'm Wes, the Dental Guy.
And I'm John, the Dental Guy. And here we are back again. And I think, Wes, today we're really getting back a little bit to our roots with a bit of maybe a Geeks Corner, can we say? And maybe a little bit of a throwback to an episode that if you've been following us for a while, you may find memorable, which is, are you a Silanator? So, I mean, what is a Silanator? This is going to be interesting, Wes, because
it's not on Battlestar Galactica. You know, it's not.
It sounds sci-fi, doesn't it? It does sound sci-fi.
I mean, come on, if you're listening to this and you love sci-fi, I mean, who didn't love a little Buck Rogers and Battlestar Galactica back in the 80s? And then Classic. They came up, and honestly, the new Battlestar Galactica, that's not new, but the newer version, is pretty good. It's pretty good.
Cylons are scary.
Yeah.
They're scary. Let's just say, you know.
Starbuck was a girl, though. That was the one thing that was kind of like, it took me a bit, like Dad called me, and he was like, well, I don't know about this, you know, and then he got into it, and he was like, man, this actually is pretty good, you know? I mean, it was.
That's hilarious. Oh, Starbuck is a girl. I love it. I mean, you're right. It takes a little minute. It's
show title.
These days, though, you got to know, like, you're going to get some wrenches thrown in the theater and in the TV with that kind of stuff. But I think what's been kind of cool, before we get into the main show topics, is to see how our text messaging has been so successful. If you're watching this on the YouTubes, video of all kinds, you're seeing a text number below you, which is coincidentally 865-544-8954. That's 865-544-8954. So if you're hanging out, you got nothing to do, and you're thinking, man, I really would like to ask the Dental Guys a question, now is your chance, because it turns out we will actually respond to those questions. Tonight is a good example of that. Wes, tell us a little bit about the text we received, or one of the few texts we received that we actually thought, you know, this merits a little response.
Yeah. Before that, John, tell us a little bit about our sponsor tonight.
Yeah. Before we get to that, I mean, you know, I know you guys think, okay, they're going to get into some meat of the show, but what's more important about that is, why are we here today? And one of the reasons we're here talking to you today, one of our sponsors for a long time, and we really go a long way back with the Dental Crafters Network, to the point where we feel like, you know, the kind of companies that we want to represent are the ones that we believe in. And the Dental Crafters Network is one of those. And we want you to think about, where's your lab today? How are they doing? Are you switching labs every 6 months, every 6 weeks? Are you angry at your lab? What's going on? Do you have issues with your guides? Is it a problem? Are you having problems with your implant restoration seating on the first try? This is where our sponsor, the Dental Crafters Network, wants you to pay attention to what's going on in their world. Discover the difference a relationship with the Dental Crafters Network can make as a full service laboratory.
That's right.
They pride themselves on listening and understanding your unique needs, guiding you toward innovative solutions. I like how they say guiding you toward innovative solutions that make a difference, because they do actually make guides. So that's perfect. Dental Crafters Network focuses on improving your patient's quality of life with cutting-edge digital dentistry solutions. Visit dentalcrafters.net or call 1-800-472-8302. That's 1-800-472-8302. And mention the Dental Guys to receive, Wes, 10% off your first case. That is no joke, man. That's a pretty significant savings. And I think it's not just the savings, but it's the quality you're going to get. We feel good about this. So, Wes, tell us, now that we're back to the show, what's this text all about?
John, recently my associate made a trip to Steve Buchanan Dental Education venue out in Santa Barbara, California. So the conversation around endodontics in my office has been one of a hot topic. And I mean, you show up Monday morning and it's a root canal core and crown first thing. You're like happy as a lark, man, because that is what we're about. We're about efficiency, doing
Yep.
great root canals. I mean, I
That's a
built a
good morning.
practice. It's a good morning for 15 years for me anyway. At this point in my career, John, I'm sad to say I'm not doing any root canals.
Woo,
I've had to give up
change.
something. We can talk about how we did that later. But my associate, I sent him on the same educational path that I went on. And after residency, I decided I wanted to go do some more training in root canal therapy. And Steve Buchanan or Dr. Ruddle was one of the two people that actually really influenced me, both arch enemies, as many dental practitioners are, but
True.
both have excellence in clinical science and education. Well, the other night, I get a text from one of our listeners, longtime listeners. Shout out to the longtime listener that mentioned, "Hey guys, dental guys, you've never talked much about the technology or the process of gentle wave." Gentle wave, John. What do we know about gentle wave? You're seeing it right here on the YouTubes. Um, this is
Yeah.
a root canal treatment that promotes pain-free and fast healing. John, years ago, you and I talked briefly about gentle wave technology and really what in the world is this? Well, I know I'm
Yeah.
not going to speak for Steve Buchanan tonight because I'm not Steve Buchanan, but I have an idea of what he might say is matching what we might say. John, gentle wave,
Yeah.
what's up?
Well, first of all, if you don't know what gentle wave is, and interestingly, I have found that a lot of doctors don't, whether they are new or seasoned, as we kind of maybe sometimes talk about, hey, what are you doing in your practice? Or what is your endodontist even doing? So, gentle wave was basically invented as a way of trying to create, I would say, a more effective way to do irrigation as well as sort of evacuation of bacteria in a safe way. So it's kind of like the idea of endovac, which is negative pressure to create a circulation of irrigants, as well as sort of some of the ideas of the endo activator of or maybe ultrasonic activation of creating bubbles, activation, oxygenation that might enhance the use of irrigants. And so
Hmm.
essentially you buy this machine, which is like $85,000, I think, or something along those lines, and you have a little handpiece that connects essentially to the tooth, sort of like a suction type of idea. You put it with rubber dam isolation over the tooth, and it circulates irrigants over a specific amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea was you might get more effectiveness. You definitely have a little bit more or a little bit less to think about in terms of how long's the irrigant in there, how much is it circulated, how many times you have to replace it, and less chance of maybe irrigant extrusion, less chance maybe of a hypochlorite accident, right? As we talk about. So, what has it actually done? It's been out a few years. How has it actually performed? And there was an article back in 2022 that I remember when we did lit review on this. I was talking to a friend of mine, an endodontist, who said, we haven't really seen this perform as well, and she had invested in it. So I went into it. I pull up the article here. It's Restorative Dental Endodontics 2022 February, and there was a really good outcome review paper that was put on by this was by Giselle Faria et al. And essentially, what they found was very successful. First of all, very successful. So let's just say it works. It's not that it doesn't work. One of the things they found, it was maybe a little bit faster than what you could get from traditional syringe irrigation. But what they also found was the success rate and post-op pain was essentially the same. So, doesn't mean it's a bad system. Doesn't mean it's a bad system. It does seem like by some metrics, we do have a little bit better, maybe irrigation penetration, a little bit more, as they call acoustic streaming, maybe more essentially ability to get irrigants around the canal. But in the end, there is a question of what is clinically significant. And the success rate that we seem to find with Gentle Wave may not be a much. And I remember when Buchanan, as an aside, talked to, and I have not been to see him in person since this came out, but I remember seeing him on an online CE course during COVID when we were all a little bit more willing to maybe say what we thought about things. It's interesting how COVID, and he was quite upset about this because he found that they even just achieving essentially the suction isolation with this, where it would stay put, was challenging
Yeah.
on a lot of cases, even to where it would like error out and it'd have to be replaced. So there's a lot more than just does it work. There's the logistics of it. And then frankly, Wes, there's just the cost of it. I mean,
Yeah,
you're
this
gonna
is one of those things is that I
you better
see
it better do something for you. It better make
how's
you
this
breakfast.
improving my efficiency and patient outcomes. And I think that the company did have some good ideas. I mean, we'll say this. Irrigation is the key. Good irrigation and good irrigants are the key to successful root canal therapy. It could be one of the most important things about your root
Mhm.
canals and getting them as clean and as bacteria free as possible. Now, so, what's our opinion on Gentle Wave is that I don't think that spending $85,000 is going to provide you with efficiency and in a way that is going to change your daily life as an endodontic dentist. Now, what I think is interesting about a lot of these companies that do have these special technologies, they market for you. So what you're buying is a marketing scheme. Okay,
That's
now
true.
you become a Gentle Wave dentist. Now you're going to attract, patients that are SEO driven towards Gentle Wave, and the type of marketing thing behind them is that, hey, this is a Gentle Wave dentist, and it makes root canals seem to a patient a little more like, oh, I can have a root canal at Dr. Such and Such office because they use Gentle Wave. And it's an $85,000 machine that is cool but doesn't really get, in our opinion, from what we can see in literature and opinions of key experts, the extra special. And I think it's a testament to, John, that really, I just did a little Google Scholar search while we were talking here. And, that last article and articles from 2016 are really, there's just not a lot of literature on it because it's $85,000. And we're talking about something that doesn't get you, that much better. And
Yeah. But I think it's good discussion.
yeah,
It's a good question. And I think that, there's things that we sometimes buy because we're trying to simplify, automate, and maybe even market. And I don't think it's a bad thing here. I just don't
no,
necessarily think we'd have to have perspective on it about what it does. And I think, interestingly, for those of you who have been longtime listeners to the show, today is a little bit along the same lines
mm-hmm.
of maybe a little bit of a Geeks Corner episode, a
Mm.
little bit of a return back to what we kind of started talking about, rather than having someone on to talk about what they're doing, as we've just come off of some really cool stuff from AO. And so far, we've
Mm-hmm.
had great reception to that. We want to talk about day to day general dentistry.
Mm.
And one of the things that we've had very good kind of, feedback on over the years has been, how do I bond things to things? And one of those major questions, Wes, always comes back to what are we doing when we have to bond lithium disilicate and when we have to bond zirconium, and what is currently out there, because we've seen a lot of products in the last few years that have come on the market that have said, hey, you can do everything with this one thing. You don't have to have 3 or 4 or 5 things. You can have one product that does it all. So I think that's today we want to kind of talk about that, because the Journal of Prosthetic Dentistry just recently, just this last month, had a really great, I think, systematic review of in vitro studies on adhesives and self-etch primers and their strength to glass ceramics. So we're talking primarily about lithium disilicate. And this article was a great summary of a lot of studies that were done on different ways of trying to bond mainly lithium disilicate, Emax, to a tooth. And if you've been around this world for a while, and you know back when we were doing your traditional bonding of just feldspathic porcelain, any type of porcelain bonding, we talked a lot about silanation. And if you go back to our episode way back, Are You a Silanator? We talked about the advantages of using a dedicated silane, right? A dedicated product that was a silane that, Wes, that's probably 5 years ago now. 4 to 5 years ago, when we talked to you all about the fact that we should consider, no matter what they say, using a separate silane. Now, what's interesting over the last few years is as many people have gotten into in-office milling, we've seen Emax lithium disilicate being milled in the office a lot more. And the question is, do we still need to hydrofluoric acid etch this lithium disilicate before we go to the bonding steps? Number one. Do we need to salinate it? Number two. Or can we use a universal adhesive? And at the same time, as we've been talking about adhesives to actually bond it to the tooth, there have been some new products that have come out that have said, hey, maybe you don't need to do the hydrofluoric acid step. We have a self-etching product available. Wes, talk a little bit about what's come about in the product landscape since we talked about silanation back several years ago that might possibly change the way we think about bonding our lithium disilicate restorations to the tooth.
The idea that I can simplify things in the office and decrease the amount of materials that I have on hand, man, if you're running a small practice, you can have a lot more materials than typically a larger practice has and keep up with them. Because a smaller practice, you've got hands-on, less hands in the pot, less chefs in the kitchen. And if you try to run a business, like any healthcare business, you try to, one, maximize patient outcomes, and two, maximize your business outcomes, and still have high quality care. I mean, that is healthcare, and it should be. And that's what dental practices should be. We should hold ourselves to that standard. Highest quality healthcare, maximize the health of the patient, best outcomes, and then also try to strive for great business outcomes at the same time. And if everything works together, you should be making money. Well, if you have to buy a bunch of stuff to do something, I mean, these products are not cheap. I mean, a bottle of primer, okay, is about, it's over $100, okay? A bottle of universal adhesive is approaching $200 and some dollars. And the more of this stuff that you have to keep around, the more the expiration date creeps up on you, and you end up picking it up and you're like, oh man, it just expired 2 months ago and I've got a full half bottle left. What do I do? So I think the idea here is that we're trying to find solutions, and these companies are trying to find solutions on best practices to reduce the amount of steps that we really have. And it talks a lot about that in this article, is about the idea of reducing steps. Let's start with the first step. Okay. We're talking about bonding some type of porcelain. We're going to talk about lithium disilicate right now, a substrate to the tooth. And so typically from the lab, it comes pre-hydrofluoric acid etched. But right out of the mill, if you're milling these in the office, you have to do some type of surface preparation, and that is hydrofluoric acid etching. Well, have you ever hydrofluoric acid etched lithium disilicate? Because I'm going to tell you right now, when you do it, it's caustic, okay? So it is acidic. We're talking about pHs approaching 2.4, okay? So you put this on the substrate, and you let it sit there for 60 seconds. And then you have to rinse it off. Now, some of these materials are gel-like, and they don't come off easy. So you better have some type of steamer.
Correct.
Or you better put it in an alcohol bath and ultrasonic this thing. So you start
and
to
that's
see...
key, Wes. That's key. I just want to say... I know that seems...
It seems
like
so...
we're just saying something.
No, we're not.
But let me just say that. Let's say you're not milling in your office, okay? Because neither Wes or I do that, all right? And you've heard why. It's a different show. But if you're not milling in your office, how often do you have to deal with this? Well, first of all, I will just say, have you ever asked your lab what they're doing after they mill your lithium disilicate? Do you know if they are doing hydrofluoric acid etching or some type of surface preparation? Do you know what they're doing? If you don't, you should be very nervous right now about what's going on. Because if you don't know if your lab is etching, air abrading, whatever they're doing to all of your crowns, zirconia, lithium disilicate, especially things you're trying to bond, you should be nervous. So find that out. But let's just say your lab is doing what they should, which is to go ahead and do surface preparation with hydrofluoric acid. Well, okay, so as you're taking this to the mouth, maybe all your bonding is going great. We're going to get into the bonding process later. What happens when something debonds, Wes? So someone comes into your office and they have a veneer on number 8, and it has debonded.
Or even better yet, right? Another scenario would be that you're in the midst of your most beautiful case and you've put the rubber dam on, because this happened to me the other day. And like you've got one tooth left to cement, and you go to seat it and you're like, it's not seating all the way and the resin is everywhere. And you're like, okay, let's just back up for just a second here. But guess what? What do you do? What do you do in that situation?
How do you re-prepare a veneer or any lithium disilicate restoration to be rebonded? You have to understand the chemistry that we're talking about right now. Because if you just take that out of the mouth, it's fell off, and you go, well...
Oh, you just bond to bond, John. Just bond to bond.
Best cement. Yeah, give me my best cement.
Give me the best thing in the refrigerator back there.
Right. Something that says ultimate or perfection.
Hey, I'll take the Hungry Man dinner, because the Hungry Man dinner has the 4-course meal, right?
That's right. I need a dessert.
I need a dessert,
here, okay?
a meat, and a potato, and a bro. And everything in the kitchen sink, put it in my Bond.
That's right. So you're like making a brouhaha back there of like HF, HP 304. You're like
music's jamming out like,
there.
dude, we're doing chemistry.
Like, I put the etch, the bond, I put 2 bonds, I put some RMGI, I did it all. You know, this is what I'm telling you is going on every day.
It is.
It's going on every day. People don't know what to do, so they go, give me the strongest thing. Or they call the rep and they go, hey, man, what do I do if like a veneer comes off?
Worst thing to do is call the rep.
And the rep's like, just put the universal whatever and then put the universal cement on the whatever and then just bond the heck out of it. And you're like, got it. So you need to understand what's going on, because what's going to happen is you're going to have debond after debond after debond. So one of the things, let's back up here, we know is that whether it's any type of glass, ceramic, lithium disilicate, it is etchable. It's beautiful. It's etchable. It's bondable. But what you have to do is know how to do surface preparation. So if you are not currently doing or don't have hydrofluoric etch as an option, you need to have it.
You need to have it.
As Wes said, once you put that on there, and Ivoclar's hydrofluoric acid etch is an industry standard, but once you put it on and you try to rinse it off, you can be like, why is it still red? Why is it still red? I mean, and the reason is,
you remember the first time you did it? And it's it's not coming off.
No, it doesn't come off. You will not get it off with your sink, or your air water syringe, your spit shine. It ain't coming, man.
You're like, what the heck? They told me to use this. I'm never using it again.
So, exactly. And it's funny, we've never talked about this.
No,
but
it's so funny with the same experience.
Ivoclar's HF etch, and you put it on there and you're scrubbing, and you're like, man, this is so freaking etched. And then you're like, I'm just going to rinse it off. It's going to rinse it off.
Chalky Frosty coming, Chalky Frosty, and like, where's the red? It's not coming off.
And it's still red. And you're like, it's still red. It's still red. You've done everything. So you've got to either steam it off, like
I need
Wes
a Frosty
said,
from Wendy's right now after talking about that.
strawberry Frosty, which is
they
limited
have those?
edition, Wes.
What?
Limited edition. They don't have them now. They don't have them now. You must have missed it. But it's coming back. Don't you worry. Right about August, you're going to get a strawberry Frosty. Watch for it. So now you've got your remaining red HF etch on your veneer, and you're like, well, I can't put this back in because they're going to have like
red tooth syndrome.
A red tooth syndrome. Exactly. So you're like, what do I do? So anyway, here's what you do. Like Wes said, either it's alcohol and ultrasonic bath, or it's a steamer, which we've talked about on previous shows. You can get from Amazon for $25, a simple steamer.
Or you can buy an Italian one, like mine.
It's not as good as a lab steamer, but it will give you the ability to clean it up. So, all right. So we've kind of established, I think, Wes, that's how we've been doing it, right? That's how we've been doing it.
Then you get your primer, right? So you can go get your primer now and actually prime this puppy. We talked about that.
So now you silanate this restoration, right, with monobond or curare, which we can talk about that in depth in a moment. And you go in and you do your bonding, and it's beautiful and it works beautifully.
But John, can't we just use the universal adhesive? It has primer in it.
And that's the thing, right?
We can etch it. Yeah, we can etch it, but we've got Scotch Bond Universal. We've got Ivoclar's Universal adhesive that has primer built into it. You know, freaking lasers over here.
Everybody,
freaking primer.
Primers
with
like
everything. It's like it's like everything.
Right. So this is the everything bagel of bonding. It's not going to work.
No, it doesn't.
Now, I want it to work.
Oh, man.
Okay, Kerr wants it to work.
I never trusted it would work.
We all want it to work, guys.
I want it to work.
But when you look, and this is going back, it's not new information.
No.
But as you have seen these, everybody's gone to universal. Every company now, if you look at their adhesives, it's going to say universal. And it's just a lie. It's not true.
No.
Because as this article points out, when you compare, okay, so say your lab does the correct preparation, HF etch, whatever it is, hydrofluoric acid etch comes to you, you're like ready to bond it. If you then look at the studies that compare a separate silane step, a separate primer step with a universal adhesive, there is just no comparison.
And we're not just
There's no
talking
comparison.
about, we're not just talking about, you know, tabletop studies here. We're talking about cycles in saliva.
Yep.
We're talking, this is legit aging experiments that show that you need to be using silane primers on your Emax and your lithium disilicate. Don't just use the universal adhesive. You will not have the same bond strength to the substrate. You won't.
Yep.
It's
and
proven.
I think what we've seen when it comes to silanes,
Mm-hmm.
okay, and I'm taking some of this expert opinion from people like Greg Kinzer that we've talked about this.
Mm.
When it comes to silanes, there are lots of good products that roughly have equal efficacy. Anything from Ivoclar, Curare, Cur, you know, they're all good. Silanes for Emax, for glass ceramics, pretty much all the same. But what is important is you don't rely on your bonding material as your silane. It is not. In fact, if this article goes into super geek mode to talk about the fact that if you try to put all these different molecules in solution, something just doesn't work. Either something requires a higher pH,
doesn't work.
a lower pH,
Yeah.
something reacts with something else. It's just you're trying to do too many miracles at once. So we need to say we have to separate these things. As good as these adhesives are, they're not going to do everything for you. But I think what's interesting, Wes, okay, so we've established you got to use silane.
Well,
okay. But one thing that's changed over the last few years, for years, our only way of doing this that was proven was hydrofluoric acid etching. And years ago, it's not new, but years ago, Ivoclar, who of course we all know is the Emax, lithium disilicates, it's the market leader. Ivoclar comes out with a product saying, hey, you don't have to hydrofluoric acid etch. You can use a self-etching primer. And Wes, I think you pulled this up. There it is. Monobond, etch, and prime. Now, this was a new product a few years ago. And I mean, I'll tell you because of all, I mean, Wes, I feel like we've been hurt by the bonding industry. We've been hurt. We've been cheated on. We've been taken advantage of, because every time I feel like someone introduces this, I'm combining two things into one, there tends to be some compromise. And this study was a really good way of making me feel a little less taken advantage of. I felt like, okay, maybe they didn't lie to me this time. Maybe they didn't lie. They say it seems to be a suitable alternative to the conventional treatment, not just for the etch pattern, but also for the silane primer.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty sweet. So we could see the potential, even though this is a weaker acid, which is interesting to hear. And I kind of feel some echoes of this, Wes, with like a high quality self-etching Denton type of material, right? Or a high quality self-etching primer that came about in our bonding when we got to, you know, we started to go through our different classes of bonding material, right? Our different generations. And we got to the 6th generation bonding material, which was SE Bond from Clearfill.
Yeah.
Back in the day.
Yeah.
And it was the first time we had a self-etching primer that actually seemed to etch enamel well. And we were like, whoa, you can't have both of those and it can't work. And it actually did. So this might be the first time where we've seen a long-term performance of a product like this that could actually rival what we've seen from the two individual steps.
Yeah. Are you using this right now? Text me 865-544-8954. Are you using a etch and prime for your substrate. Now, the interesting thing about this is really the aging studies aren't there for this yet. There's some we need to see, in my opinion. Again, I'm trying to reduce stuff in my office.
Of course.
This doesn't do it for me. I'm not going to go out and I'm just going to tell you, John, I'm not running out and buying this because I just don't think that I'm willing to kind of give up doing the hydrofluoric bit. I've got to have hydrofluoric acid in my practice anyway because I do bond to ceramic in the mouth quite a bit when I'm doing some kind of repair or transitional bondings. I mean, you're going to have hydrofluoric acid etch. Typically, you're going to have some type of primer. And that primer, this cannot be used on zirconia. This is not a zirconia conditioner. This needs to be reserved for, at least from what I can tell, for lithium disilicate. So, the short of the matter is I think if you're milling in office, and this is the first time this restoration is being bonded, it is something to maybe turn your head to and look. But from what the literature shows, and this was an exhaustive search of literature that this article did, trying to find as much backing to support the idea that we can use a kind of a combined product here. The only thing that they could say is that, hey, it seems like the bond strengths are good. It would be great to see the aging process, which if you're listening to this, you don't really know what aging is over time, bond strength does decrease. We know that. How much it decreases at 12 months, 24, 48, 5 to 10 years is always interesting. And most of the time, it's some of these new products, if you see them come on the market, John, hey, they're real good for about 2 or 3 months. And then you age them out and then all of a sudden gone. So be careful to jump on the bandwagon here.
Well, and they admit in this paper that it produces a less dramatic etch pattern.
Oh, yeah, it did.
So no question that they call out and say, when you look at this under the microscope, it doesn't etch as dramatically as what we get from HF. So I think really, Wes, you bring up a good point. Think about it from a standpoint of the time it takes you. If it takes, how much is HF etch? Super cheap, to be honest.
It's cheap. This is almost $200, by the way, John. I looked it up before we got on the show.
So you already have to have HF in your practice, guys, because you're going to have to do repairs, things like that. You're going to need HF in your practice. So you're not saving anything. You can't be like, oh, I don't need HF anymore. And you already need silane in your practice, right? You can't not have it because you might have silane plus MDP, like with Curare's ceramic primer, for instance, is what I'm using now. I've switched over from Monobond because it has more MDP in it, which is great for zirconia.
Oh, did we just tell the dental guys community what the dental guys' favorite silane primer is?
We might have.
Yeah, I think we just did, but go on, John. I'll bring it up here and just put it on the screen. We'll definitely condone this as the dental guys' favorite primer.
Yeah, well, whenever we talk to Marcus Blotz, and if you know anything about zirconia bonding, Blotz was the one who came up with essentially the way to bond zirconia to tooth. And essentially, Blotz came up with ACP protocol, and it was essentially a way of kind of predictably bonding from these. And one of the things that we asked him about, and this is back at Spear Summit years ago, but it was confirmed again about a year ago, which was that when you're looking for MDP monomer, which is the thing that helps to join our zirconia to our tooth with the resin cement, the more concentration of MDP you have in your primer, the better success you have. And Curare has The best clear fill ceramic primer. That's the one right there on the screen if you're watching the video version of this. And Curare is funny. I've joked with this for years.
Mm-hmm.
The Japanese companies have the worst marketing. I don't know why. They
And some
just
of the
don't seem to
best
care.
products, man.
Yeah, they have some of the best products. They were some of the first to do effective bonding, but Tokiyama, Curare, they have some of the worst overall marketing. I don't know why. So some of you who might not be familiar with Curare or Clearfill, you know, check it out. Panavia might be the one thing you've heard the word Panavia before.
Right.
Well, if you've heard of Panavia, you might not understand, but that is in the same family with this same ceramic primer. So
And honestly,
do a search.
this primer is so good. It is, and I highlighted it on the YouTube here again. I'll flip it back over. That this is good for all silica-based ceramics, zirconia, composites, and here's the kicker. This is one thing I use it on almost weekly. Weekly, I'm using this on metals. And so if you're, an orthodontist in here, okay, if you're an orthodontist and you're bonding lingual bars, or you're doing perio splints out of milled metal bars, or you're doing old school Maryland bridges for temporaries for your implant patients, like with lingual metal wings, do that a lot. It's great. It's cheap.
Yep, great.
Cheap. Okay. Etch it with a micro etcher, aluminum oxide. Steam it or alcohol bath the backside of that metal. Scrub it with the clear fill primer. Okay? And now you're ready to add your adhesive, your choice. And then
and a good resin cement.
And then a good
and
resin
that's what
cement.
Blott's taught, right? Is it's air abrasion, it is a good primer, and it's a good resin cement. So we do advocate for there is a difference. And we would encourage Ivoclar, if you got something better, you need to publish it, because so far we're seeing Curare is winning in this world of priming and bonding. So
John, as we kind of get close to the end of this show, we're going to leave out a little stumper for everyone here, because we're going to talk about in the future episode is right now, Wes, the dental guy, is using a Curare primer and a 3M resin and a 3M bonding agent. Right now, I'm mixing product lines, which I've said in the past that you really should try to avoid. You should try to keep everything matching, because it was researched to work together, just like Curare wants to work best with Panavia V5. And so the question is should we cross brand products? That's a question for another show, John.
Yeah.
Don't go there.
I'm not going to tell you, because I made a change. I'm not going to tell you.
I know. So let's just move on. Hey, what a show tonight. Hey, are you a Silanator, or are you just the guy that, you do everything all at once? You know,
you're just mixing up the brew. Mixing up the brew.
You're back in the lab.
You got everything in there. Everything.
Oh, man. I think it's definitive. We've got to be careful before we move forward. I think you ought to turn your head, especially if you're milling in an office, to this product from Ivoclar. Cool product. Maybe need a little more aging studies, but seems like, at least in the beginning here, it's something to start considering. However, I don't see that I would switch, because I've got to have the hydrofluoric acid anyway. I need the other primer for the zirconia and the metal. So why would I add another $200 product to the mix? It's just one of those things. If you're trying to maximize patient outcomes, maximize business profitability and efficiency to get a better all healthcare experience, you try to minimize some of the products in your office so they don't expire, John, because when they expire, really the morality of it is that you should throw it in the trash.
Yeah, exactly. And I think this is where we're trying to do a little bit of a middle ground here always of pushing the limits, but also trying to make good business and clinical sense, because you want predictability in your practice. That's the number one thing. Predictability equals profitability 100 times out of 100 times. So that's why you tune into us, because we're going to give you what's going on, what's new, but not just what's new, what actually works, and when you should start to think about changing things or when you maybe should not. If you've enjoyed what you've heard on this episode of Dental Guys, please engage with us. Like us, share, subscribe, tell your friends, tell your colleagues, hit us up on Apple Podcasts with a 5-star review. We're going to continue to bring you the best content in clinical dentistry that we know of, always trying to bring the very best to you. So keep tuning in for more episodes on what you should be doing and what you should be changing or not in your practice. Every time we're going to bring it to you. For Wes, I'm John. We are the Dental Guys.